Welcome to the Honest Designers Show, your transparent look into life as a modern designer. My name's Tom Ross and I'm the founder at designcuts.com, and this week I'm joined by my fellow Brit and expert hand letterer Ian Barnard, American retro design legend Dustin Lee, and the incredibly talented South African illustrator Lisa Glanz. In this week's episode, we look at how external stresses can impact your design work, mindset, and even your creative business. From depression to recession, I nearly got that rhyme out. There's a ton going on in your world and the wider world, and it's important not to underestimate the impact that this can have upon your creativity. Let's get into the show. So in today's episode, we're looking all at the impact that external stresses and general life can have upon your design work. And I know between the four of us, we have talked quite a lot about feeling burnt out and a bit down in the dumps with designing, but we've always kind of talked in the scope of how your design work is the cause of that. How, you know, we've talked about how your design work can stress you out and ways to mitigate for that, but we've never really talked about how the rest of your life can actually have a huge impact on your design work, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Unless any of you are like, I don't know,
robots.
Superhuman, and that doesn't happen. Yeah. Any robots out there? Ian, you're looking quietly confident, or does this happen to you as well?
No, I suppose, you know, we all, there's a certain level of stresses. You know, the world isn't perfect, so illness can always pop in and accidents. For me, I suppose, I don't know how much this applies to Dustin as well, but you know, one of my children might be ill, so and my wife's work normally takes priority because she has clients, because she's a speech therapist. So whereas I'm just sit on social media, so I can so you know, it can be, most of the time it's fine, but it's a sort of juggling act sometimes for, you know, things like that. And the reason why I sometimes miss these recordings because of the time we do it, and sometimes I just can't get out of childcare stuff mainly.
No, we told all the listeners you were off doing something really important design related.
Actually, last week, or whatever,
you were at YouTube, weren't you?
I was at YouTube, but then I couldn't do the other date we had, to, you know, because we changed that date, and then I was had childcare issues. So
it happens, but yeah, that's case in point. And I'm glad you said about juggling, because it isn't just stressful, horrible stuff. It can be everyday stuff. But I know certainly this is true of me in work, but also in life. I tend to categorize and compartmentalize into key areas. So you've got like friends, family, work, health, relationship, all that kind of stuff. And it's really hard. I feel like as soon as I focus in on one or two of those, the others suffer.
Always.
And so it is that kind of work-life balance where when you're actually trying to improve other things in life, because we are people beyond just being designers, just about.
We are?
Yeah, maybe not you, Lisa. So dedicated. But yeah, like as soon as you start like giving a bit of love to like another aspect of your life, suddenly it can derail your work or your deadlines or whatever. And yeah, I think it's something a lot of designers don't really talk about, but it's got to have a profound impact, right?
I remember hearing this analogy. You know, we've been on an analogy kick. Some wise person had said, or maybe not, someone said that life is like having like 4 stove burners. Might have heard this. And one's like work, family, friends, and health, I believe it was. And they said if you want to be good at one of those things, you got to turn off one of those burners. So you be the person that decides which burner. And it does feel like that a lot of times. You have to turn off a burner in order to push forward in one area.
Though if you turn off health, then you can't push forward on other things.
Yeah, you can. You just like will not be healthy.
True.
Yeah, but then that would
really
stop you being efficient. If you, I suppose, do you mean health as in exercising and diet, or you take
Yeah, I
like
don't
health
mean like
as in-
your heart stops beating. I mean like
I was thinking you say you turn off health, then you're like bedridden and you can't do it.
You're just bedridden on a conference call with all your friends and families and colleagues. So you're nailing those 3 areas, but you're bedbound.
Yeah, like I think they're just like being like, you can't be an amazing father, an Olympic athlete, a great business owner, and a great husband or whatever all at the same time. Like something's got to give.
I beg to differ. I beg to differ. Just look at Bruce Jenner.
Who's that?
I don't know who Bruce Jenner is.
Well, now Caitlyn, of course. As in Kardashians,
Yeah.
dad.
Oh, sorry. I
Okay.
didn't follow that at all, so I don't know who
Me
they are.
neither.
I'm a little bit clueless.
Okay, fine. Feel free to cut that bit out.
No, keep it. Because
gotta
now we
keep
know
it
who the
in.
Kardashian person is in the room.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's because it's on in my house way more than I would like not be watching it.
So
I'm
it's probably at the same time I'm reading my children's stories at bedtime.
There is
I
that.
like that. I like that.
Okay, so all right, let's dig into the actual design side of it. So when we're designing, how does that actually impact your guys' work? If you're feeling really stressed or there's external factors at play or distracted or whatever, does that make you less motivated? Does it make the work worse? Like, does it kind of flow less well?
I find I either do one of two things. If it's not insanely stressful, sometimes I'll retreat into my work, which is probably unhealthy, but sometimes I use it as an escape. You know,
That's what I do.
it's just me, and I'll just retreat into that. And then, but if things are really bad in my personal life, I can't focus to work. Like, literally cannot keep my brain on it. Like, I have to resolve whatever those things are.
Yeah, I think if things are really bad, like say you're dealing with a loss, somebody close to you or, something like that, like a really terrible situation, it is difficult to focus. But I find that even, spending like say 20 minutes at a time to do the design or do your creative stuff is actually healthy because it takes your mind away from that just for a short time. And I think your mind needs a little bit of a reprieve, from that stress mode. It's hard though because you're obviously freaking out all the time about it, but I think I think we're lucky that we actually have the careers we have because we can do that. Imagine if you're a doctor going to work and dealing with broken legs and people dying. I mean, that's not exactly an escape from a stressful situation. I mean, that's like just as bad.
It might be for them.
It might be.
I like that a lot about the thought of escaping. Although what I would say is, say you are dealing with bereavement or something like that. If you're hopefully in a decent job and hopefully you have a nice boss, you would think they're probably going to be sympathetic. They might look out for you a bit, cut you some slack, etc.
Oh yeah.
You don't really get that when you're self-employed because if you're working slower or whatever, you're going to earn less money. You'll be bringing in less client work. If you're selling products and stuff, then the market doesn't care.
No.
Right.
Like the market does not care what's happening in your life whatsoever.
They don't care at all.
No.
It's not. Yeah, like if you back off the effort, even for a moment, which we've all experienced, then it will impact the results you get and the sales you make and the money you bring in. And like no customer base out there really is going to care and be like, oh, well, let's keep buying just to prop them up.
But it's a good point you bring that up because then that means if you are in that situation, like the four of us kind of are, I think then it's important to set a boundary because if you don't, that'll have a negative impact. So I think if you've developed quite a good rapport with your customer base, they'd understand if you said, I'm going through a bit of a rough time, my customer service isn't going to be as fast as it usually is, they'd understand. Yeah.
No, they'd understand as hopefully your clients would.
Yeah.
But what I'm saying is that doesn't equal money. That just
no,
equals
it doesn't. But I don't think you should add that extra stress to your life at that time. I know it's hard not to because you still have to earn a living to eat, but
yeah.
Well, and this is a thing where planning again comes in and can be really helpful. We can all safely assume that we're going to have personal struggles that are going to make it hard to work and hard to do things. So by doing things like Tom, you had mentioned on the previous episode, by doing things like having systems in place that's going to take off some labor by having maybe, for instance, contractors that you can refer work to. And maybe you say, I'll have you on my referral list of contractors and you give me a 20% cut or whatever for the referral fee. Like you can put things in place that prepare you for the inevitable fact that something's going to happen.
Or you have a buffer or a rainy day fund.
Absolutely.
Kind of thing built up. So you should never be to the wire. If anything goes wrong, I'm screwed. There should be that safety blanket there. I'm actually thinking, as we're talking about this is so applicable because this is not like, some super rare thing. We got tens and thousands of listeners who we love, by the way. Dear listeners.
We love you.
Listening at home, we love you.
I love you.
That's terrifying. We just lost some listeners.
We also gained some.
They think they're tuning into Barry White there, I think. But yeah, it's something everyone goes through. I bet every person listening right now has had some kind of loss, as horrible as that is, or tough times or whatever. Like, we're all human. Everyone goes through it. And so just because we're designers, we're not immune to that stuff happening.
No.
And we are human, so it's bound to impact on our work and our revenue, and it can become this vicious cycle where it's like, well, I'm struggling and that's stressing me out, but then that impacts work, so work suffers, so that makes me more stressed, and you can kind of see how it becomes this catch-22.
And there's also some amazing things I've seen people do with struggles like this, and someone who comes to mind is a friend of mine, Peter Del Tondo. He's he does like web design. I don't know exactly enough to describe how he does it, but anyways, he had a family member who got cancer, which I just can't even imagine. My father had cirrhosis of the liver and it was horrible, but I imagine cancer is similar, perhaps worse, or different. But he ended up making a whole little design nonprofit that was to generate money for that type of cancer. So he channeled that into like this positive thing through his work, I guess you would say. And I never thought of it until now that way, but that's like a very productive, kind of beautiful way to handle when something happens when you can.
Exactly. I was going to actually also mention the whole thing of, even though, maybe living in America and the UK, you guys don't, I know you guys have political sort of, turmoil, but nothing maybe to the level of, third world countries and stuff that they have to deal with on a daily basis and things like that. And it's stressful, let alone being a librarian. Like, you're just trying to like earn a living as a freelance designer. All these kind of political things that you have no control over, or the fact that you don't have,
or a recession, right?
Yeah,
something
a recession,
like
or your currency is failing, or whatever.
Yeah, that's such a good point, Lisa. I didn't even think about that, because it's like that's completely out of your control.
Totally.
But guess what? People stop spending money on in a recession. They don't. It's not like, we're going to make our website slightly more fancy, or get a new logo.
Yeah,
it's like we're going to buy the food for our families.
Yeah,
right.
But the exciting thing, if I can say that, it sounds terrible to say the exciting thing, but is that often art or design or creativity, the best stuff comes out of these adverse situations, because it forces you to think beyond. It forces you to think out of the box, and maybe, yes, so people aren't coming to you to do their brochure design, but maybe there's other stuff that people need at the time, so if you look at all the artists out there that we know and love, like musicians and fine artists and everything, their work often comes out of struggle. So even though as human beings struggle is a terrible thing to go through, we only really grow and become better creators. And I don't mean that only artistically, I mean that in everything, like get better mothers, better fathers, better everything through struggle and going through hard times, because it forces you to look at yourself. It forces you to look at other things and pushes you to become a better person, I guess, or find better ways to be a better person. And that's growth doesn't come out of nothing, everything going hunky-dory. Things have to change and things have to challenge you to to push yourself. So it can be a good thing, although the struggle at the time is hideous. Yeah.
You're so right.
I have to add, because and this is not nearly the same as some of these things that happen in third world countries or different places where they struggle with that. But when I was drinking too much, had my anxiety problems, and then had a baby on the way, like Retro Supply literally came from that. It came from the crisis of the weight of having that baby put on top of that and coming, and all of a sudden I took risks and worked harder and did things that I never would have done because of the pressure of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. You're completely true. I think any strength I have has come from the most difficult times. So being kind of screwed over with a project actually ended up inadvertently leading to doing design cuts. Getting really sick led to forcing me to delegate and grow an amazing team. It's like every tough thing I look at in life, an amazing positive has come from it.
Yeah.
Man, it's so true. It really is. Like the most dramatic leaps always seem, not always, but so many times happen when that happens. You're absolutely right.
Yeah. So as hard as it is, I mean, if I just look at living in South Africa, I know a lot of South African listeners are going to appreciate this, but it's very stressful living here. It's, politically, at the moment, Cape Town's going through drought, so we've got no water. The rand is not great. So there's a whole lot of stuff going on around us. And for me, I find peace in my work. And if I guess if I didn't have this, I mean, I look at people who deal, kind of have, if I can put in inverted commas, a normal job, where they don't necessarily have a distraction because they have to deal with public all day. They're confronted with the stuff all day. It must be far more stressful for them than it is for me. And I just think I'm so lucky to have my job. So I
love that image. There's all this chaos outside your window, and you're locked up in your loft.
It is. It literally feels like that sometimes. In a bubble. Yeah.
That's great, though. This is a good excuse to use one of my favorite words, but it's catharsis. It is cathartic to put your art into escaping what else is going on in life and the world around you.
Another interesting thing, too, is with technology these days, options are so unlimited. You can really do anything, right? And and just life in general gives us so many options that when something negative happens, oftentimes what that means is that options are taken away. That might be we have less time because of something that happens in our personal life. It might be that we're whatever. Let's say it's less time. So that might make you ask questions you wouldn't otherwise ask, or be forced to ask questions like, what's most productive? What am I doing that doesn't need to be done? And what is productive and important? So you can kind of transform, like these kind of things mold us and make us prioritize and find what truly is, useful and valuable and focus on that.
Yeah. I might have said this quote last week, but I read it where it said busy is a choice.
Yeah. I've been thinking about that. You know that?
Yeah. And it is like you control how busy you are. Like no one's forcing you.
No.
But that, as you say, Dustin, that's a prime case. It's like if you're feeling really stressed, well, maybe that will trigger some introspection that will change your patterns long term.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
But we really, we always become like a self-help podcast, I think.
Yeah, but I think a lot of people have the same issues, so.
Yeah. And certainly creatives, because we're not just clocking into a job where we can turn our brain off and our wider life is not going to impact it. I mean, maybe there probably aren't many jobs like that, but I think certainly design, because so much of your emotion and your soul flows into your work. If things aren't kind of adding up around that. Yeah,
no, it's difficult.
And it's so cool because if you're a designer, you can mold these types of things. When I was a bank teller or a personal banker, I did whichever one. If something bad happened, like I couldn't be like, okay, it's time to go be freelance bank teller or freelance personal banker, right? Like, but when something happens as a designer, you can actually mold the way you operate and design a new way of doing business. I mean, you're not trapped at a design job. You can change how you freelance. You can change when you freelance. It's really exciting. as I think a designer, that you can do that.
Yeah, we don't realize how adaptable we are. So if we're finding we're not getting enough clients in and we're charging, I don't know, $5,000, we could say, well, actually, I'm going to start doing $50 jobs and just do a bunch of them. You could do a huge, like, flip it on its head, drastic change in your business purely because of either external forces like the market or just down to how you're feeling in life, where you're like, you know what, I want to be busier and I want to flip between loads of different jobs. Like, you have the control to do that, which is cool.
Yeah. It is cool.
I'd like to go back onto what you were saying about having a buffer and stuff, and that you know that you need to sort of look at your money and prioritize money to put into that buffer. That might mean the sacrifice of spending £1,000 on a iPhone 10, or just that. People, it's fine for people to have these things, but like for me, I won't buy an iPhone 10 because I can invest that money back into my business, to further my business, rather than, meaning that I'm going to have to then save up more money for like certain gadgets. And there's certain gadgets I will get, but
can I ask you, and when you say invest in the business, like what kind of things do you think of when you think of investing in yours?
I think of, like, for instance, stuff on my YouTube channel that would make the quality of it better. I would think of tools I might use for lettering stuff, stuff that I suppose I remember you always mention Gary Vee on the show, or try not to, but I was talking to someone in one of these events. There's like little clips. He does little clips that he puts on social media, and it was talking to a guy who had like a Porsche t-shirt on, and he goes, the way you get to buy the Porsche company is by not buying Porsches. And do you understand that? So So the way you get to,
ain't that the truth?
The way you get to these things is by not buying things.
Yeah, be smart. Don't waste your money.
And that I've definitely seen over the past year with stuff going on in America and stuff going on in the UK, that how quickly stuff can change. On a political level, that can really change how people spend their money.
For real, yeah.
And like when like the election was going on, I had no sales in my shop because eyes were focused on that, and it gave me an inkling. Okay, that is something to be aware of, and I need to prepare now in case the UK makes a complete farce of exiting from Europe. I need to make sure that I have a buffer in case sales go down, because when people, like you speaking to it, when things change and people are not so certain of how the country's doing or the income's doing, then they're also going to spend. Design is going to be the first thing that goes, because it's not like a plumber or Mr. Builder.
No, it's a luxury.
It's a luxury. It's not something that people will need. And so I, especially with stuff like stuff I do for Procreate, that's, for some people that is what they're using their job, but sometimes it's just stuff they play around with. And so they're not going to go, I'm going to save my money now. So
a perfect example of something coming up that could affect, sales or jobs is that, I don't know if you guys talk about it in the UK, but we're having a net neutrality legislation trying to be passed through, which essentially they're trying to let companies like Time Warner and Comcast have control over or throttle internet, and essentially potentially make it like cable, where you buy packages, where you buy this package and you can get things like Snapchat and that, or if you have a lower package, you can only do email. Who knows what it'll look like? But the point is that if it passed, buying patterns would immediately change long before the effects of the actual legislation took place.
Yeah.
So it makes sense to think about it now, because that could really impact anybody who makes a living online, whether you're a freelancer or selling, have a shop.
Yeah.
Do you guys feel, I feel like it's kind of my job as CEO at Design Cuts, but I feel like I live in constant paranoia. So we will have a good month, and I'll still be thinking, what would the series of events be to make it all go away, or to make it all come crashing down, or what's the worst case scenario? Like, even when things are good, I will be having those thoughts pretty regularly, because it's like constantly thinking, I never want to be blockbusters. I never want to just coast and suddenly be like, oh, I didn't see that coming.
Yeah, we actually, well, I have an extra straight. I do think of that, but mine goes even deeper. We always paranoid that the rand is going to go to nothing, which means pension, every cent that you own becomes nothing. So, and that's a reality. And I guess that's why a lot of people are moving out of here, like Nikki. So yeah, so it is.
You're big, by the way, when you don't have to say her last name.
She's like Madonna.
Yeah, and you know it's not good when you move from one of the hottest countries in the world to one of the coldest countries, wettest countries.
She's our neighbor.
It's crazy. Yeah,
for people listening, she's talking about Nikki Latz, FYI.
So I totally get what you're saying. It is a stress. And you have to think about it, and you have to prepare, and you have to, I don't know, some of it you have to actually let go. Like, I understand what you're saying, because you obviously have commitments now that you have staff. But some of it you actually do have to just, it's out of your hands. You can't stress about stuff like that.
Yeah, it's a waste worrying about it. You can try and predict some of it.
Yes.
You can plan for the worst case scenario. That stuff is sensible. But like, do not waste stress on what you can't control.
Yeah.
And this is purely from a business perspective, but I always really hate when people run a business and they're kind of constantly loaded with excuses of external forces, because I think, we're all in the same boat. Anyone in a job or business is in the same boat. It's about how you deal with it. And if every other week it's like, oh no, it's the election, and then this legislation, and then this economic thing. It's like, that stuff is real, don't get me wrong, but like, we're all in the same boat. It's just how you
I'd
deal
even
with it.
add to that and say there's somebody who's in a worse boat than you making it happen. So stop whining, make it happen.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And the thing is, there's practical things that you can do straight now, like, for that to be easier if something does happen, and like we're just saying, having a buffer, being sensible with your money, even that, because people get their paycheck, spend it straight away, or they make a bit more money and then they spend it straight away. Things go up and down over time, so you have to bear with that. Having multiple streams of income, which is something I'm still working on and takes quite a while. So you need to start putting that in place straight away, as in building that up, whether that's, having, selling, maybe selling digital products, selling physical products, right? Doing an online course, building up a YouTube channel, whatever that may be. Because, say you have 7 streams of income, if one goes down, that's the other 6 can support that, but if you've got one main one, if that goes, then that's, going to be financially pretty bad. And so that's another thing you can do. And it's just, just all these little bits that will really, because when it comes to it and something does happen, you're alleviating the stress in the future rather than, at the moment. So you can see how vulnerable the world is and how quickly things change, that being prepared for that, not stressing all the time, but being prepared in the way that you're organizing your, which you're freelance and stuff like that, so that if that does happen, you're going to go, okay, this happens, I've got this buffer, I've got these other streams of income. I'm just going to have to, that's going to support the thing that's just fallen away. I'm going to be able to support that. And I think, that's what we're all trying to do. We're trying to have that sort of, there's certain places where we, sell our products or get our work in. For me, for instance, Instagram sometimes changes its algorithm. and I don't get any inquiries for a week or something like that. And so it's a weird, it doesn't.
That's a great example, Ian.
Yeah.
Like, so many people have been hit by the reduction in organic reach on social media.
Mm-hmm.
So many designers, especially on Facebook, where like less than 10% of the people who used to organically see your content now see it. So when you talk about the importance of diversifying what you're putting out there in terms of your content and revenue streams and stuff, that is so crucial, because if you're hanging everything on Facebook, and I've read articles about companies that have done that, and they're like, okay, we just had to fire all our staff because
you can't do that.
It's dropped overnight, and it's completely out of our hands, and that's really scary. So what I would say is, one good way to mitigate external risk and stresses is to constantly invest in yourself, because you're the key asset.
Yep.
And I was playing this paranoid game the other day of what would happen if it all went away, and the terrifying thing there is, it's not like if you lose a traditional job and you go and find a similar one at a similar level. If you spent years building something and it goes away, you are screwed. Like, odds are you probably can't replicate that.
Well, not easily.
And certainly not easily.
Yeah.
And so at first that terrified me, but then I started thinking, well, hold on, like, I am constantly learning so many valuable skills in doing it and developing myself that I become the asset.
Yep.
Right. That kind of leads me to the mirror of this, or alternate strategy for it, is you can financially prepare, you can build your own brand and prepare, but at the same time, we just don't know what's going to happen. A perfect example is email is often considered to be one of the most safest bets in terms of like revenue, because you own the email list that you build and you can send out to it. But at the same time, Google came up with, the promotions tab. It didn't end up being the nightmare that people thought it would be, but by Google controlling where it goes, a lot less people might see your message. And this brings me back to this idea that I try to practice, and I need to do a better job of it, but it's from either Marcus Aurelius or Seneca, one of the two. They said, like, once a year or something like that, get your most ragged clothes, get your most ragged blanket and the cheapest food you can, and lay on the floor and sleep on the floor for a day or two, and eat the cheapest food and wear the cheapest clothes. And you'll realize that if everything goes away, everything will still be okay.
Mm-hmm.
Like, life will not get as bad as you think it will. It's oftentimes in our head. And I guess I say that because we can't, no matter what we do, we don't know what's going to happen. And if we can say to ourselves, even if everything was eliminated from me, I'll be okay.
Yeah.
Like, it won't be great, but I'll be okay. That can eliminate, I think, a lot of the what ifs and fortune telling we do in our brains.
Yeah. And it goes to that old saying of, you can't control the external stuff. The only thing you can control is how you react to the external stuff. So
how you see it, right?
Yeah, how you see it. And I think that's quite an important point, to lower your stress levels when the outside is chaotic. You got to focus more on how are you allowing that to affect you, how are you allowing that to affect your creativity, how you deal with your family, your clients. Because if you're lashing out because you're stressed, it's just going to create more stress, and so on and so on. So it's so super important to find that peace, that kind of peace ground, or go and do whatever you have to do to, your whole rituals that you do to calm yourself down. It's important.
I remember when I was in a lot of credit card debt.
Yeah.
And I was building Retro Supply, and it got successful enough that we were able to finally pull out of this just pit of debt that I never thought we'd get out of. And I remember for so many years, this debt had just stressed me out. I just felt like it was this weight on me that I didn't know how I'd ever get off of myself, right? And I remember when we paid that off and we got the bill in the mail and it said 0. And it just occurred to me in a moment that it's just micrograms of ink on a piece of paper.
No.
And you know what? I ate the same meals that I ate when I was in a ton of debt. I drank the same, the soda tasted the same that I drank, or the Kool-Aid or fruit juice, I went for the same walks. It's just numbers on paper. And I'm not saying like, oh, go get in a bunch of debt, or don't worry about your debt, or don't take care of your stuff. I guess the point though is like, put it in perspective. Things are not as amazing if you're out of it as you think they are, and they're not as horrible when you're in it. I guess that all again goes back to just realizing like these things don't really directly result in happiness as much as we sometimes give them the power to.
It's it's undeniable, as you were saying, Lisa, how this spills into your communication with clients, into the standard of your work, and I think we've gone kind of broad today, right? We're talking almost about life, or this would be applicable to anyone in work, but I do think it's something which a lot of designers struggle with. I would say what I said earlier about kind of reacting quickly. If something happens, if the market changes, the opposite of that would be getting stuck in your ways. And I think that can be very dangerous. So you don't want to live in constant kind of hyperactive paranoia, but at the same time, you want to be speedy and you want to be reactive in a good way. Yeah. And in a proactive way. So if your industry gets turned on its head within 6 months for some reason, you don't want to be the one where it's like, well, I'm just going to keep, plowing on forward, doing the way I always have done.
Yeah, you can't.
You have to mix it up.
It's kind of like having the proverbial, I don't know, the bag with all your stuff when D-Day comes. I don't know. So you got to have like your, you got to be prepared in a way. And I think a lot of people, whether it's designers, any employed person really, and even in self-employed person, maybe not so much self-employed because we're more aware of stuff like this, but employed people may have this huge assumption that tomorrow my job will always be there. And it may not, so be prepared, and both mentally, financially, and all those things. But yeah, I think mentally more than anything, because you got to, as you said, Tom, you got to think quick. If this and this happens, what am I going to do? How do I feed my family the next day? So yeah.
Let me give you an analogy, because I know you love those, Dustin.
I do.
I'm thinking about you here, Ian. But you're obviously doing a lot of amazing scripted calligraphic lettering, like Copperplate style and so on. But if in the next 3 months a series of media events happened where that became associated with the worst stuff in the world, and suddenly everyone hated it, and they were like, right, Copperplate lettering and scripted lettering is like so off trend now, it's really unpopular, no one wants to look at it, let alone pay for it, I'm pretty positive that you wouldn't keep putting it out. You would pivot and you'd mix it up, and you'd start all different kinds of lettering, and it would push you into a new path, right?
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's what something I see as a positive thing about the fact that I have so many different styles is that I keep, I suppose, moving forward, and it's sort of drove me to get the iPad, because I could see how, lettering was taking on to it. And that, if I hadn't have bought the iPad and invested in that, seeing the future, I wouldn't have got the, to be working, doing a workshop in the Apple store. And I thought,
and you just said about how your brushes you've been doing for Procreate have been selling really well.
Yeah, exactly.
But if you were stuck in, well, I'm only going to brush stuff in Photoshop, and you didn't evolve with what the market was doing, and it's like, oh, well, hold on, this is kind of popular, and I'm trying it, and I can see things are moving that way. But you're constantly doing that, probably consciously and subconsciously, I would imagine.
Yeah, and I think it's just keeping one eye on. And you can see this if you keep a look at there's in Instagram there's the Discover tab where you can look at things that are popular and things that are being shared, and also like on Pinterest, because everything that's really good and always pinned really well will come to the top, and it's just keeping an eye on, okay, you can sometimes see little patterns emerging and getting on top of that, whether for me, that's a typeface in that sort of style or doing posts in that sort of style, because, organization, brands, design agencies want to keep on trend themselves. And so they might see that you're doing that and they think, okay, I want to get that person. He seems to be the first or one of the first to be doing that. I want to get that person on board. So it's definitely not changing for changing's sake, but keeping an eye out on what the environment is doing. As I know that a lot of companies are suffering because they didn't take Facebook seriously when other peer companies were, and suffering and playing catch up now because you have to invest the time in doing that. So yeah, just I suppose it's being conscious of what looking at design blogs, looking at design magazine sites and seeing what's going on, because that will orientate the work you get in, really, I suppose.
But what I love about that is the forward momentum. And I know you referenced Gary Vee earlier, and he had this great
He's going to start charging us, just saying.
Oh, he really is. He had this great graphic where it said something like, all this looking back is effing with your neck. Kind of implying that people are like constantly, looking behind them and kind of analysing what has happened. But whether you're looking for opportunities, which I think is the better thing to do, or looking for threats on the horizon, if you are constantly moving forward, it's like, okay, what next? Okay, that looks kind of, there's some potential there. I'm going to try that style. I'm going to try selling that kind of thing. I'm going to target this new opportunity in the market or these clients. And okay, there's a threat over there, so I'm going to sidestep that. When you're constantly charging forward, instead of like either resting on your laurels, which sucks, or looking back and being overly analytical about stuff which has already happened and you can't control. I think that sucks for anyone, but it certainly sucks for designers.
Yeah. Or being so precious about, being so precious about your stuff that you're not willing to be flexible is also dangerous. Sorry.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And this all ties into the whole idea of how your personal life or how stress outside of work impacts it, because if you keep this philosophy that you guys have been talking about, you're planting seeds for the future. So when something stressful outside of work or in your personal life happens, you can harvest the seeds, so to speak, of that you've been building. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Yeah.
So it's not so hard. It's not so bad. It's not like you're trying to, create something out of nothing. You have all these little seeds that have kind of been developing, and you can say, oh, this one looks promising. Here's something I can do.
Yeah.
If I'm not unable to do this, like what if God forbid my arm was off, my arm got lopped off in my garage door or something. Oh, this is getting morbid.
Wow.
That's terrible.
That is a hell of a story.
But I'm just trying to think of something extreme where like it would change how you think. But if you had different seeds in different areas, you'd be able to do things. So like, for instance, I have the passive income for designers course. I could still teach that without my arm. Oh, I don't like this. I don't like thinking about that, guys. But you know what I mean, though? Like it's a seed somewhere like that could be used.
Yeah.
That's why I'm thinking about starting doing calligraphy with my left hand, for the fact that you could, like you say, I could break my right hand, which would put me out of action for quite a while.
It literally would.
And so, and another thing is, it's like a two-pronged thing, is that learning left-handed is always more difficult because the way we write in this part of the world is we write from left to right.
Left to right. Yeah.
And
I'm a lefty, so you're preaching to the choir.
Yeah,
you smudge the hell out of it.
And I don't know, not being a lefty myself, I don't know the struggles that you go through. So
I think one of the non-struggles is we're meant to inherently be more creative. So just saying.
I think left-handed people made that up to make themselves feel better.
I think they did. We're really a bunch of like Ned Flanders, you guys with the left-handed shop.
Well, it's a paradox because you guys are super creative to come up with the idea that you're creative. So that actually makes you creative?
Exactly. Who's getting who yet? Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
But what's funny is, Ian, if you were to do that, like if you like broke your right hand and then started doing your left hand, like your channel would probably like triple anyways. Like people would be like, the guy that did the vegetables, remember him? Yeah, he started doing it with his left hand now.
Maybe like you, Dustin, I should set up another feed and just call it my left hand or something. And it's just calligraphy with my left hand, because then you'd see a progression of see how, because this would be starting like as not as a child, because you've got the mental knowledge of how to structure a letter, but the physical action of a child.
Mate,
but
I would follow that, and we love
Yeah.
a self plug on the show, so we'd all regularly plug you each episode.
But I think you should call it Ian's left hand. Ian Bernard's left hand is better than you.
But at the beginning, it probably wouldn't be, and it'd take a long time for it to.
please call it Ian's left hand. That's like a real charming little handle, I think.
Yeah, I'll give it a go. I'll give it a go.
Yeah, do it.
Because the thing is,
Absolutely.
I have no problems with showing that I sometimes suck, because people really appreciate it. Like
I know. We saw your explosive ink.
explosive ink on my hats that look terrible.
I do.
It was
Makes
hilarious.
me feel good.
Okay, so as a closing thought, what I would say is experience is actually the best teacher with external stresses and factors, because I, for one, say 10 years ago or even a few years ago starting Design Cuts, when something external went wrong, I would freak out massively. And then the second time something big goes wrong, you freak out a little bit less.
Yes.
And after 10 or 20 years, something that would have sent you into a panic before, you're like, we'll get through it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not so serious.
But it's funny because like with Retro Supply, I would like sales drop off every Friday afternoon. They just die. Because everyone's ready to leave work and ready to not worry about work and go do stuff, right? It took me like 2 years to like realize my business wasn't coming to an end every Friday. Every Friday evening, I'd be like, it's finally happened. Like the other shoe is finally dropping. And then like 5 years into it, I'm like, oh, well, on Fridays, people just really don't care. I'm not that important. Of course, they're eating pizza and playing, with their kids. But the same thing happens like with freelance work. So I hear a lot of designers say certain times of year, for instance, a lot of them say during the summertime, oh, well, business dies down. And you think, oh my gosh, I'm failing at being a freelancer. But it just turns out a lot of businesses aren't doing stuff maybe in the summer or some time of year,
Mm-hmm.
It's when you get enough money in 1 month and then get no money in the next month. It's just the way that,
So true.
how you bill clients and when they pay and stuff like that. And it is quite a roller coaster. But after a couple of years, you do, and it does take a couple of years to get used to that. The fact that, because because obviously sometimes for me, I don't calculate how much money I earn in a year until I get to telling the accountant how much I earn, this is how much I earn, but I've done my spreadsheets. And it's amazing how sometimes you think, oh no, I haven't earned as much as I did last year. And you may not have, but it's better than you thought because it's gone up and down. So I think it's quite hard to see month in, month out what it's like.
I think just as a final analogy here, I don't invest personally. I don't know if any of you guys do. I'm quite interested in it. I'm trying to learn about it maybe for the future.
You're talking about like Bitcoin.
You mean you don't invest at all?
All I do is Bitcoin.
What is Bitcoin? Can someone
I'm talking like the stock market kind of thing.
Oh, okay. I nearly had a heart attack for you, Tom. Okay, yeah.
Yeah. So why? What were you thinking?
He just blows all his money on Porsches.
Invest as in like like save or whatever.
In food and clothes. So yeah, like if you look at the stock market, like it goes up and it goes down. Some of it you can react to. You can do things like spread your risk and so on, like we talked about with your income streams as a designer. And then you get huge external forces like a recession or a bull market within that, and you just kind of have to go with it. And if you stressed over every little blip within
you
that,
can't.
You would die.
Yeah.
So you have to just zoom out on the whole thing. As a lot of investors say, they're like, it's time in the market, not timing the market, and so on. And so in the same way, it's not trying to like get every moment of your design career perfect. It's trying to just stick at it for a long time, and you'll have good days, good months, bad years even perhaps. And you just ride it out and learn from it and react. And hopefully when you zoom out and look at the long term, you've made a success of it.
Exactly. I like that. Good analogy.
Thank you. Cool. Well, let's maybe wrap it there. But thanks everyone for tuning in. Bye for now.
Bye for now.
See you guys.
Bye. Thanks so much for listening to this week's episode. We hope that it helped you to avoid beating yourself up over the extent that external pressures and forces can have upon your design work. We're all human and these impacts are only natural. All 4 of your hosts have experienced them and it's likely that you have too. As always, you can find full show notes for this episode over at honestdesigners.com or find us over on iTunes by searching for The Honest Designers Show. If today's episode helped you, it would mean so much to us if you took just a moment to leave us a quick review over on iTunes. We've been seeing some incredible reviews coming in lately, so thank you so much to our dear listeners for those. Thanks again for tuning in, and we will see you next week right here on The Honest Designers Show.